Welcome back, everyone, to the law offices of Quibble, Squabble, and Bicker here on September 2nd, 2020. Our new client for today is not so much a client as, well, it's a client because we're going to litigation. It's school subjects on trial, which is quite appropriate considering school is now in session, and it's quite different these days since people are basically going to school via Zoom and Google Meetings and whatever other form of online education there can be.
Tinder.
Does anybody want to put their first school subject on trial, one that they feel that needs to be grilled and possibly discarded from the entire curriculum of all schools in the country and the world? Anybody got one? I'm thinking algebra. It would be a good one to at least not necessarily remove entirely, but make it an elective as opposed to a requirement. Because, I'm in my 50s, as we all are, and I've learned that I've never had to use algebra my entire life.
Right.
And
But if you're never exposed to algebra sort of somewhat forcibly, you might not find out that you have a gift for it. That's something that, you just have a math sort of frame of reference. And if you just did basic arithmetic, you're like, okay.
I think you'd still toss in pre-algebra because that could give you, I guess, an indication of whether a person has that aptitude or not. But I don't know, forcing the only value I've gotten out of algebra is combined with geometry, which is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. That has helped me. The Pythagorean theorem has helped me in life on occasion,
Well,
a
you've
few
never really
times.
worked with your hands, have you? Like if you were a carpenter or built anything, you
Uh
need
huh.
algebra. So a lot of people do use algebra in their day-to-day life. Just your job.
How do they use algebra in those circumstances?
When you have to build something
As a
to figure out
carpenter,
a
how do you use
triangle,
algebra?
how much wood do I need to make this triangle shape,
Uh huh.
and how do I cut it
So how does
properly?
algebra help more than common long division or multiplication?
You can't figure out that kind of stuff with addition.
Give me an example.
Like the area of a circle, isn't that more algebra? That kind of stuff, like pi.
Why would you need to know the area of a circle, though?
If you're a carpenter, you need to know
I
how big
think
a
I
circle
think
is.
Matt is just triggered by math.
Yeah,
I'm
because
sorry that
he
math was a
sucked at it.
horrible subject for you, you obvious,
I got
liberal
into
arts kid.
I did advanced mathematics in school. My
Hey
You
point
Matt,
were
what's
an
was,
honor
17 times
student.
4?
what's that?
What's 17 times 4?
17 times 4, 8,
Look at him
2,
sweating.
it's
He's
68.
freaking out.
It's 68.
I don't know
Very
how this
good.
has
I was
devolved into
testing
that.
you.
If I had to pick a math that most high schoolers go through to abolish, I would say geometry
Uh huh.
over algebra. I actually, in business and as a computer guy, do use algebra from time to time.
Uh huh. How
I
do you use
believe
algebra?
I use algebra in figuring out equations on business models, on things that I don't know that I have to kind of reverse engineer and figure out.
Uh huh.
I mean, I'm not a real good algebra student, but I know that the skills that I'm using, if I was honestly better at algebra, would probably be not as hard. I'm able to kind of figure it out just because I've done it enough.
Yeah.
But it's algebraic. It's not 10 times 2 is, there's,
There's no
X.
calculus involved.
Yeah, there's some
Yeah.
calculus, although I wouldn't say I'm doing calculus.
Yeah.
My son ended up doing calculus. He took an avionics class and he came home and was like doing that shit. And I'm like, I don't know, you're on your own, kid.
Well, I think there's a point where it's either an elective or required, and I think I'm more interested in what should be required and what can be an elective. So if somebody wants to further their education regarding math, I don't really have a problem with that. I just mean in terms of, do you need those skills definitively as much as you need a different one?
Well,
In
that's an
other words,
interesting question. So then really what it boils down to in terms of subjects in school is what skills do we think kids need versus what skills are unnecessary? Like, literature is not really necessary. I don't. I enjoyed it. I studied it. I read a lot of books, but the fact that I read, I don't know, Catcher in the Rye, that doesn't mean anything to me as my day-to-day existence.
Well, it
You
made
know,
you
if
have
you
to.
were a police detective, it would. My dad, he was a dentist, and one of his patients was a New York police detective. And he said all the best detectives, a lot of them were literature majors in college. Something about analyzing text
You know,
transfers to being a good
yeah,
detective.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying that, if you apply this idea that, do I really need this in my life? You could kind of shit off a lot of stuff, and we could just do arithmetic and balancing your checkbook and maybe credit card percentages and compound interest, and yeah, there you go. You're now one of the 99% working class. You know everything you need to know
Yeah, to work at a
to
cashier
be a
job.
cashier, to be an effective cashier at 7-Eleven.
Yeah, I think that I was asking my wife, who's a school teacher. I said, well, if you were to get rid of a subject, what would it be? And she didn't give me a subject. She said standardized testing should go.
Oh yeah,
She said
Well,
that's done no one any good, and that's the subject. She goes, but if you're going to add a subject, you need to add the subject of adulting.
I agree.
adulting.
Adulting.
Adulting needs to be a subject
That's not
of.
like adultery. It's
No,
different.
that would be. I think if adultery was added as a subject, that would be the class that the teachers would be taking, not
In
the
the lounge,
not
in
the
the
students.
teacher's lounge.
The lounge in the depths of the plumbing within the school system, and where the pipes are in the boiler room.
See,
That's what
I'd
that
like to
class would be
rather.
called.
I
Where
think
the
most
pipes are
classes.
laid.
They would lay pipes and explore the pipes at the same time.
I
That's
Well,
would
how good.
rather talk about classes to add myself. I really don't want to cut most classes. I think it's good to have a well-rounded education. So I was thinking more of things I wish we taught the kids, but we don't anymore.
For example,
Civics,
like what?
how the government works.
Well, are you sure that that class isn't offered anymore? Because I definitely took
I
government when I was
just
in
not my
school.
school. It's. I wish everyone took more civics because it seems like people don't even know what's going on now with the government. Like, what rights does the president have? Can Congress do this? Can the president do this? It would be nice
well,
if
my
we as citizens all knew. We could call bullshit quicker and say that's totally wrong.
Or maybe like make it more focused so you have the government, but then you can like isolate it per the branches of the government, like legislative, executive,
Mm-hmm.
and the fourth one,
The
judiciary.
fourth one,
That's right, the judiciary.
the media,
I was like, I
judiciary.
suddenly got stupid. I'm like, what's the third branch of government? Oh, I'll just say it's the fourth and give me a chance to think of it.
the guys who
So,
wear white wigs.
right, those guys, they're all wearing the white wigs, all very
So, I
powdered.
mean, my son basically recently graduated high school, and I can't say that civics specifically, and by civics, what I mean is the down and dirty how the government works was not taught specifically. You were taught the three branches of government, and you were taught, how that sort of stuff, but you weren't really taught how it works. You weren't given an inside view of how does a lobbyist work, and how does what does a state legislator have to do with what's the states do versus the federal government. That is glossed over
I don't even think
tremendously.
that's offered in college classes, for that matter. Even if you're because I studied some political science in college, and we didn't go into that depth. Main thing, but it was an intro class. I didn't go further, so I'm sure there could have been other classes, but we basically learned about the various different styles of governing, like communism, democracy, the works of Thomas Paine, um, and numerous different aspects of that. But we never really delved into what does it take to govern, what does it take to run a city or a town. I think that would be valuable information.
Yeah,
You know, if,
it's kind of like your wife suggested. It's adulting as a group and as a community and as a society. People don't understand how to adult as individuals, and they really are lost in the subject of how adulting works as a culture. And just to be controversial, and that's the problem we have right now in this country, is that everybody's protesting, and that's all fine, and it's fun, and it's dopamine, and it's exciting and exhilarating to run around at night and throw rocks at things. But you know what? The hard work comes to making the changes that actually change the way that police behave or
Right.
change the way that our government works. No one wants to do that shit. They just want to go and, run around and chant and that's easy. That's fun. And you do that maybe once or twice, and then you have to move on and you have to do grown-up stuff and balance the checkbook and pass a bill, and no one knows how to do that.
I think it's kind of hard, though. Also, it might be more fun to throw rocks. But also, I think a lot of people don't have access to government. Like, even if you really worked your ass off, if you don't got enough money, you're not going to get that far. You're not going to influence that many people. Like, if you're some poor person, maybe you can be very charismatic.
Have you ever tried to influence somebody in the
No.
government, Greg? All right. So the difference is you have to actually try, regardless of how much money is in your pocket. Anybody can go and meet with legislators and have conversations with them if they're willing to take that meeting or not. It doesn't matter how
But
much
if I
money
don't
you have.
slip them $100 bill, they're not going to listen.
That's not completely true. It really depends upon how persuasive your argument has to be and what you're trying to solve, what you're trying to fix,
Yeah.
and whether I agree with that. Because, as much as people want to say that every member of Congress is a horrible person who's self-centered, looking out for themselves, it's not actually true. There are decent people who work in government. There's a lot of douchebags like anywhere else, right? And generally the leadership, they're just trying to stay in those positions of power. But for the most part, there are hardworking members of Congress who put together legislation that benefits the people in their communities. And the way that takes place is by speaking with your legislators. And when's the last time you actually talked to anybody in a political office, Greg? Did you go out of your way to get something accomplished?
Never.
Okay, so you're speaking from a position where...
Well, I'm a lazy man. I don't really do anything.
Okay.
So,
Well,
Okay.
but I'm saying if I did have a passion for politics, I know it would be more of an uphill battle.
You do fight the lobbyists because they have the deep pockets. They have the organizations that are funding them, and it makes it easier for them to get things accomplished because they have more people they can hire to go through and talk to all these congressional members. But both Brendan and I have done like lobbying work on the Hill in D.C., and I went through many soles of shoes, walking around Capitol Hill and walking through the different congressional offices, just not knocking on doors, but just walking in and trying to talk to somebody. And some people will talk to you, some people won't. Some people will keep appointments, some won't. Some things get delayed, some things get done. Sometimes you can get things addressed, sometimes you can't. Again, it just depends upon the amount of people you have working with you. However, that takes us back to dealing with civics in school, like you had brought up, which is people don't know that you can do those things. Like you didn't know that you can do something like that and have no money, right? People should know that they can actually talk to their legislators. I mean, hell, here in Oregon, if you go out to Salem, it's really easy to talk to nearly all the legislators because they're all basically working out of cubicles. Most of them don't have their own offices. The local politicians in Salem, so you could annoy nearly all of them if you wanted to.
Could I ask you guys, as lobbyists, have you ever had a legislator be like, "Hey, this would get done if you, did a little something for me"?
No.
One hand washes the other.
I've never had
been propositioned.
But I wasn't really a lobbyist. I was lobbying.
Yes, to answer your question directly and not quibble about it, yes, absolutely.
That happened to you.
It wasn't always cash.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely a quid pro quo system in place on Capitol Hill.
Yeah.
Right.
So if I wanted somebody to say something nice about something I was promoting, some bill or idea or whatever, there was an expectation that I was going to deliver something for that support.
Yeah.
It didn't always mean cash.
But generally, it didn't mean cash. Generally, it meant vote on some other bill or support some other agenda that they have. At least that's what I found.
What I found, and this is just from the perspective that I came as kind of more of a grassroots community organizer, was yes, it would be A, support this, or B, support me. Like, drum up a bunch of crazy rabid support for me in my home district because I'm sitting kind of precarious against a person in the next election. So, there was something that needed to be done, whether it was money or, like direct cash or not. But this is the thing. People don't understand how this works. And no one would teach the nitty gritty of this stuff.
Yeah.
Because if you did, then all of this craziness would start to fall apart. If people really understood it and then they decided to do something about it, which I think a certain good percentage would, then we wouldn't be rioting in the streets. We'd be actually getting something done.
I think if one of the classes that should be added to school is like anti-douchebaggery classes. In other
Yeah.
words, teaching people how not to be dicks to each other. I think
That could be part of the adult course, being an
well,
adult.
the fact of the matter is that could be a course for kids, to be honest, starting when they're
Oh
young.
no, but they need it, but that'll be helping them become
It's
better
like it's
adults.
like how to have the attitude where it's like anti-bullying per se, but instead of addressing the negative behavior, it's like reinforcing a positive behavior within the people if that's what they're trying to do. I mean, obviously, there's always going to be your antisocial types in school because Hitler was a child once too. So it starts somewhere. There's always
He
going
was
to
really
be
ugly though.
serial killers started off in elementary school as well. So there's always going to be those types that come across the plate of the teachers, and I don't
What
envy
would you
them.
call this class?
The anti-douchebag class.
Just that? Just call it that, maybe?
I don't know if that would go over well if you're trying to pass
No,
that
I
as a
don't know.
bill.
I don't.
A
I
third
mean,
grade
what
class?
one person's douchebag is not another person's douchebag. So I think what there, and I'm being kind of serious about this. I think there should be something taught in schools, maybe starting in elementary school, about mindfulness and
Yeah,
and
politeness,
being
that type of thing is really what I'm
and
talking
being
about.
present and not not being subject to your every goddamn stupid thought, and realizing that you can just be there and talk to somebody and not have some pre-described idea fed into your face, and then you spit it out of your pie hole and make an ass of yourself.
I think there are a couple of different things. Critical thinking, I think, would be a very key subject to add. And I actually
Yes, I
took a
want
class.
that.
I took a class like that in college. Actually, normally logic classes are ones that deal with these weird formulas, but I took a logic class that was specifically about argumentation and the fallacies that people present to you when you're having discussions with people. And if we could have had something like that and had that like probably whenever people were relatively young and could figure out those concepts, I think that would go a long way to figuring out a lot of the issues that are going on today currently. And then combining that with, like Brendan said, like a mindfulness thing, but it's I was thinking etiquette, but that goes into stupid shit like what's the right
Which
frickin'
fork goes
spoon to
on the
use?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like which is the right cocaine spoon to use, you know? It's
Is
like
it
you
okay
use
to wear white after August?
or wear white after have somebody blue cocaine on your body. The question because it'll hide it better from the police. But
Yeah, etiquette talks about that a lot. Miss
but
Manners would always talk about coke etiquette and heroin. Never share a spoon with someone when you're shooting up. It's
Make
rude.
sure to dispose of your needles properly.
exactly. But also at the same time, it's like how do you treat yourself well too? Because you can also go overboard in being nice to other people, and then you disregard your own
Yeah,
issues.
I've known people like that. They're just too nice and they're always miserable because everyone takes advantage of them.
Right. So
Well,
it's
we've had
recognizing the different types of people that are out there as well. You know.
right. We've had the opportunity because we homeschool my youngest, who's just turned 11, and in the equivalent of third and fourth grade, we're now fifth grade. She studied philosophy. We did a whole bunch of philosophy and Plato, and
Wow.
I mean, she knows Kant.
Wow.
She knows what she knows stuff that blows my mind because she remembers it, and it's that kind of stuff that, again, you can literally teach if you do it right, those kind of heavy philosophy concepts at a very young age, and kids just absorb it. You'd be surprised. Adults wonder why kids just take to technology and they can't figure it out. It's because kids don't have any. They're just like, it's playing. It's like, oh, it's interesting, and there's not any fear or predisposed ideas about it. They just accept whatever it is and listen, or play, in the case of technology.
Are you going to teach her nuclear physics next year?
No, I'll wait for my son to come back from school and teach her that. I much like math, just like Matt. I was not, I teach math, fifth grade math with her. When we get to high school, it's going to have to pass. Mom's going to have to take over for sure.
So you actually have real experience with this, Brendan. So were there any things you said, let's not teach our daughter that? We never liked it when we were kids. Because you actually are in charge of someone's education.
Don't you have to follow like some restrictions from the state as well, like things?
This is Florida, dude.
Yeah, so you can do whatever you want.
I could teach her how to make meth if I probably wanted to. I call it chemistry.
You're right, it probably is chemistry.
It is chemistry. Yes, there are state guidelines, and they vary from state to state. And I'm sure Oregon is much more restrictive than Florida for sure. And so we have a curriculum that we have to follow loosely, and there's a lot of different online sort of curriculum providers that say they're aligned with these state standards and all that kind of stuff. But to Greg's question, no, there hasn't been anything but I mean, we're talking fifth grade here. There hasn't been anything we've avoided or decided not. Like, I mean, believe it or not, in Florida, third, fourth, and fifth grade, Florida math, algebra, there's a whole section on algebra and a whole section on geometry. It's just a section of the whole thing, along with times tables and all the stuff you'd expect. But there are basic algebraic stuff that they learn. And it was funny, she really took to geometry just as a concept. So no, there's not been anything we've steered away from.
What made you decide to start teaching her Immanuel Kant's philosophy? How did that come into play? All right, so she's
good.
Yeah, but she's 10 years old, right? And these are very existential concepts, right? It's like dealing with personal identity and your place in the world. And so at that age, it's kind of like, what made you decide to put all that heavy shit on her?
I think how it started was Holly had an interest in philosophy. There's all sorts of levels of that you can get into. And I found on YouTube something called Crash Course Philosophy, which was, I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's great. I highly recommend it. There's Crash Course, all kinds of stuff. And they take these pretty heavy philosophic concepts and they break them down, and it's very entertaining. The guy's kind of funny, and he does a good job explaining the basic concepts, like, talking about self-determinism and Batman and, kind of cool stuff. And Holly started watching it, and Dagny ended up watching those videos with Holly on YouTube. I'd sent them to Holly, like, I think you'll like this. And then she started watching it, and then Dagny just took off. She just had a real strong interest in it.
Huh. I was going to suggest philosophy, actually. I think kids should learn philosophy. I would add that class subject because it gives you tools. It sharpens your brain. Even if you think it's nonsense. I took some philosophy in college. Some of it just seemed to be like masturbatory, silly stuff. It's like, you're just being all too clever for your own good. But the whole process of learning philosophy, it's like, I don't know, tunes your brain up and it gives you critical thinking.
Yeah, it just depends upon which philosopher you're reading, I think. Though.
Yeah.
If you throw Nietzsche out there in the beginning stages, you may have created a Nazi before you're...
Yes. He's got some good stuff, though, that guy.
Yeah.
Nietzsche is often misunderstood. And unfortunately, he got very associated with the Nazi thing. And some of his stuff is just dark, for sure.
Sure.
But the point is to, at least from my perspective in teaching my 11-year-old about Nietzsche, is understanding this is one way of thinking, but you have to compare that to other ways of thinking. How does Nietzsche compare to Camus? Or how does Camus compare to Kant or Hobbes? Or what's a social contract? Is that important? What is free will? I mean, yeah, you're right.
Well, that's a song from Rush.
What is free will?
Yeah, you asked what is free will. Free will is a song from Rush.
We put that song on trial already.
I think we've already covered prog rock. Maybe we should do a prog rock on trial.
It's prog metal in this case. But anyway, free will is like a 3-minute song, so I don't know how proggy it is. But anyway, so So okay, so you would add philosophy as a class, as an elective, or as a requirement in school?
Requirement.
Philosophy is a requirement. Okay,
Me too.
so that
I
that would
agree.
be, but that would come under like the English heading, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that would come under English and literature and that sort of thing. That's why Holly taught it. I do math and science,
Okay, but
social studies.
literature you would get rid of entirely, or would you keep it as an elective?
I would keep it as an elective.
Okay.
I think
Now,
there's a certain amount of that you have to do, and then beyond that, you're on your own.
I think there's
I
some
think
books that are very important to read when you're young that create a particular mindset as at least Americans, for
Lord
example.
of the Rings.
No, I'm talking about like Henry David Thoreau on on Walden Pond,
But see,
and
that's philosophy.
civil disobedience. Yeah, well, it is to an extent, you
Yeah,
know.
that's definitely
And
philosophy.
those are generally within the curriculum, or at least juniors and seniors have to read at some point. But Catcher in the
Mhm.
Rye, I can't remember jack from that particular book. I don't remember anything about it other than why did they call it Catcher in the Rye. That's basically all I can remember from the book. I
I saw
remember
and read
reading
that
it.
book.
Lord of the Flies had more of an impact on me
Oh, I
than
like that one. That was
Catcher in the
great.
Rye. That's coming in
Uh,
more handy.
I've read both of them, and Catcher in the Rye, I think is a really good book.
I
I
probably
had
just have to read it again. I just remember whenever I've been forced to read books in my youth, I always resented having to read the books. If it
yeah,
was
see,
done voluntarily, it was one thing, but forced to read it was just like, I have to get through this
it,
stupid thing.
it, it was the opposite for me. Catcher in the Rye was on a list at my school that it wasn't recommended. Like they had the recommended reading list, and they had other books, and I read all the other books.
I
I didn't
remember
read Little Women.
1984. Sorry,
What's that? Go ahead.
I was just saying that 1984 and Animal Farm, George Orwell, we had to read those. I love those. Those are still two of my favorite books ever written.
I think Animal Farm was on my required reading list. 1984 wasn't, but I was interested in 1984 because that was the year I would graduate from high school.
Ah.
So it always kind of had a fascination for him. And I wound up reading some other George Orwell book that I don't recommend, which is
Could I
something.
come to the defense of literature, though, and English classes? Is that I think the stuff we were talking about, like the two classes you brought up, not being a douchebag 101,
Yes.
and even what did you call
Although
it,
there are no
adulting?
101s in
Yeah,
secondary
I'm
schools,
sorry, and adulting.
primary
I
school.
think literature helps with all of that, like reading other perspectives, people you might never meet in real life. A good writer can convey like inner monologues, how people are all over the world. You might never meet people like that and not understand a certain person who's like a character in fiction, a well-defined character in fiction. I think literature is just you learn about humanity, and it's good to know about the world and people around you, and I think it's valuable.
Okay. So you're agreeing with basically most of
I rest my
the
case.
educational system. But
Yes,
but
I,
I think
as
they're
but
right.
as an elective or as a requirement.
No, required. I want to keep it as a requirement.
Okay. I
Yes.
guess the
I think it gets required through high school, and then it becomes an elective. Greg, I'm a huge reader. I've read tons and tons and tons of books, and I totally agree with what you're saying.
He is 10
Yeah.
feet tall. He is a huge reader.
In college, we had it. You had to take some literature, but then, of course, after four classes, you could drop it and do whatever.
All
Right.
right,
But you
well,
had to take some.
let's take a real quick assessment about all the different classes that are available that are so shop class as a subject,
That's a good one.
required or elective?
People should know how to fix things. I was terrible at shop. I wish I took it more seriously,
That was
and I
probably
can't.
that was probably the subject that I had the most fear of because you always had
The movies,
the saws going around, and you always thought that somebody's going to lose a finger. And
Crimson Saw
and there's so
Blade.
many stories of people who actually do, and they cut their hands and shit
Yeah,
like that. So it's like that wasn't really a thing that I wanted to do. I think I made like a piggy bank that was just this mutated thing, and I wasn't good for it. I also had this weird reaction to glue gun glue, where to me it just reminded me of snot, and so it kind of turned me off in a
do you
certain
know I
way.
was the only kid to fail shop, probably in the history of my school,
Were
because
you
that was
like
an easy class.
were you
I
licking the
failed.
metal or something? What was going on?
No, I didn't chop a finger off. They probably
That's
would have
good.
definitely
Chop somebody
expelled me.
else's finger off.
Yeah,
I
but
think I think
I
shop
failed.
should I think shop should be required for sure.
Yeah.
Um, I took metal shop. I took wood shop. Um, I think it's great. I think the problem with a lot of people is that they don't work with their hands. They don't know how to fix stuff. I wish I knew how to fix stuff better than I do, and I kind of know some stuff, but that's the problem. You know, when your toilet breaks at 2 a.m. and you don't know some basic plumbing shit, that's a real problem. The fact that you didn't read
How to
Catcher in the Rye at 2 a.m. means absolutely fucking nothing.
So basically, get rid of anything involving philosophy
No,
in
no,
place
no,
of shop,
no.
because that's more important at 2 in the morning if your plumbing goes.
I just think it shouldn't be relegated as it was in my school. The reason I was in shop class is because those were my friends and they signed up for it and they were a bunch of gorillas and I liked them and I hung out with them. Even though I could have been in the advanced literature class, I didn't want to spend time with those people. And I learned stuff.
We had to take shop in my school, but of course the girls could take home ec, and they all did. It
I
was
think home
very,
ec is gone. I don't know what happened to that.
yeah, it
Yeah,
could
that was actually another subject my wife brought up. Needed to return his home ec. I mean, I learned stuff from home ec in elementary school. That's where I learned that sewing machines were beyond my capability of fully understanding. But
that's some tough shit.
I actually sewed a pair of pants at that age. But I think a lot of these classes made me learn the stuff that I was just never going to be any good at. Like an art class. For me, art, you know, I can't even draw a straight line for crying out loud with a ruler. It's really incredibly
But
difficult
it's
for me.
nice to expose, like, you didn't know how bad you were, or like you might have loved it. And if you were
Yeah.
just like, I don't have to take art, I'm not gonna.
Well, I think that
And
should apply to then all the classes. You should be exposed to English class and decide if you're going to be any good at
like
it or
take one, you
not.
have to take one class,
Right.
and then after that, it's your choice.
And so you
Well,
take one English class, you go, you know what? I don't need to know. I don't needs to know Mo.
right. I think that what we're talking about, what we're touching on is I think what you were talking about in terms of that article in Finland is they're saying by the time you're into high school, you may have already figured out what you're good and bad at if you
I
did a
don't
good
think any
job.
of our listeners know about this article from Finland, so I should bring that up. So
Oh, that's right.
there is an article. Articles have been coming out for the last few years in Finland because Finland has decided to get rid of all school subjects. Now, if you guys are going, what are you talking about? There's not going to be any classes in physics, math, literature, history, or geography. And the fact is that Finland's education system is considered one of the best in the world. So they're always like in the top 10 in international ratings. Instead of individual subjects, students are going to study events and phenomena in an interdisciplinary format. There's an example. This is an article from the Financial Tribune from February of 2017, so just 3 years ago. For example, the Second World War would be examined from the perspective of history, geography, and math. Now, they are focusing this more on seniors in school, so I think up until your senior year, then that would be the case. But that reminds me, there's a college in Annapolis, Maryland called St. John's College, and they don't do subjects either. They do it based upon really the great books, and it's conversations that you have in those classes discussing those great books. And some of those great books are about economy, like Keynesian economic theory, and as well as dealing with Plato and Socrates and what have you. So that's like a very liberal arts education from that point of view. So this is kind of like taking that from a college level and bringing it down to a high school level. And I'm curious, like, how that's going to work if you toss all the subjects out and you kind of learn things in a communal fashion, is what it sounds like that they'll be doing there.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
math seems hard to learn from studying World War II.
What's that?
The learning math from studying World War II
Well, again,
seems a
these are
little.
seniors, right? So it's like at that point, normally people have gotten through their requirements for math. Usually it's
Right.
Mhm.
like up through algebra, you're required to do anything after that would be like an elective. Like if you're doing trigonometry, calculus, or pre-calculus, those are more electives for math. Like I took trigonometry and algebra 2 in high school, but as an elective, and I still question my own sanity as to why I chose to do that to myself. But I think in this case, as seniors, you'd be able to get a more well-rounded perspective on what's going on in the world by being able to discuss it from all those different levels. If they're saying Second World War would be examined with history, geography, and math, how does math play into that? Is it like what what angle do the howitzers go up on to blow up
Yeah,
the most amount of people? It's like they bring geometry in to figure out how to kill the most amount, or like what was the best way to eliminate the 6 million Jews? And
there were 10,000 Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto. Hitler shipped off 7,000 of them. How many are left? Like little math problems like that.
Yeah,
think if I was good at,
there's six three-story buildings in the ghetto. Some of them have secret compartments. How many Jews were hidden in five of those buildings? I think
I think a better subject than math would be science and physics and chemistry. I think those would be better served with World War II stuff than math necessarily.
in school, one of my favorite memories in school was from my chemistry class in high school, because that's where the experiments would take place, right? Of odd things. And one of the things that this particular chemistry teacher did was he tossed sodium into a basin of water. And I had heard about this from other people years past, but most of the people in my class had no idea what this experiment would do. So he took like a chunk of sodium, he put it in there was a basin of water between like his desk and the front desks. He put it in the basin and then he hid behind his own desk, the teacher. And
Nice.
so I don't know if you're familiar with the effects of straight sodium in water. It explodes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
That is a bad teacher.
the so-
No, that's a great teacher.
the sodium started sizzling on top of the water, and then also when it goes, and really what happens is you get snow. That's the extent of the explosion. But he was making it more dramatic by
Right.
doing that. Probably
Did you
also.
guys duck and cover? Did you guys totally jump
No,
into
I
your
was just
desks?
I was back a few chairs, so I was like, oh, finally, I'm like, finally, I've heard about this. This is finally going to happen. So that's like, and he had like this impish look on his face when he was doing it too. So he had obviously done this many times in the past. And
Mhm.
all I ever thought at that point was like, how can I get some sodium and put it in somebody's toilet? That's like the thoughts that I would have,
So
because
you learned something important that day.
I just learned that if you put sodium in water, it'll blow up. But
Yeah.
it didn't necessarily spark me into becoming a chemist. It made me more interested in chemistry. I think I got a better understanding of the periodic chart of
Hmm.
elements because I was more interested in it. And the periodic chart table always kind of fascinated me to a certain degree. And I think that's important for people to know because you need to know what chemicals to have together in your house and which ones not to have together, or bad things will happen. So I think that's important to have. Physics, on the other hand, I never took physics, so I can't say whether it's something that should be mandatory or not. Did you guys do any physics?
I did.
In
Yeah.
college,
I didn't go to college. I did
and I
some
failed.
physics. Yeah. Okay.
I was
I,
so bad
I,
at physics.
I
It's
failed so
hard.
hard I didn't go to college. Um, I found physics fascinating, but I found it fascinating from more of a thought experiment. I
Hmm.
was stoned and it was trippy to think about atoms and quarks and the very nature of the universe. I don't think I've ever done anything with physics that makes any difference in my life, but I find it interesting as a subject, and I always have.
I would also
I,
like to rush to the defense of science classes, where I always thought part of why America was pretty strong was after Sputnik was launched. They really promoted science classes because they were like, we
what
want
do you
to beat
think
the
the word
Russians.
what do you think the word Sputnik actually means?
Potato. No, I don't know.
It's like
Steel
giant,
potato
giant
in
armored
space.
robot, rocket thrusting potato.
Yeah, but
Potato in space.
but that was a thing where Eisenhower is actually like, we want our kids to learn science like hardcore because we want to beat the Russians. So we had like this maybe weird motivation behind it. But I mean, if in this world, modern world where technology is so important, like the country that has the most good scientists is going to win, is going to be the most powerful country probably, or at least more powerful than they would be. So I think science is just very good, like should be definitely required. And some kids are going to hate it and they're going to suck at it, but
Right.
they
Most
might
of them. Most of them
they
are going
might
to suck
realize
at
they
it.
love it, and then they might keep continue to go, and they might have the cure for cancer when they're
That,
35. And
Because I think if you look at everybody in your graduating class and what they're doing now, it's like what percentage of them are living lives that are beneficial to millions of people?
yeah, most jobs aren't.
Yeah,
Well, doctors, there's a lot of doctors.
I said
They're helping
million.
out
I said
people.
millions of people.
Millions,
Millions, exactly.
billions.
well,
Millions.
the
Very few.
the thing about science is I mean I agree. Science and math, the whole STEM thing, definitely needs to be taught. It
STEM
needs to be
thing? What's a STEM thing?
science, technology, engineering, and math.
Okay,
STEM.
got it.
Big programs, especially targeting young girls to get involved in those kinds of
Is this like a Trump Epstein thing?
Trump Epstein.
You targeting young girls? What are we talking about here?
What?
Hey, just continue. Someone will get that joke.
Yeah,
No,
I did.
no,
But
I
it
don't
wasn't
think
that
that's
good.
funny, but that's just me.
Okay.
He has a
So
daughter, Matt.
I've got
A young
two
daughter.
actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
two young
You've
daughters.
got daughters as well.
All of them are. Anyway, go ahead.
Okay. So anyway, it's a subject and it should be taught. I'm done.
The defense
Thank you
rests.
for your humor about Epstein and Trump.
You're welcome.
Let's talk about R. Kelly now, Matt. How many jokes can you make about him?
I don't
Yeah,
know.
I mean, I
Was he a
suggested we make
science
this
teacher?
about bestiality. I mean, I didn't realize we were going to jump right into
Pedophilia.
pedophilia. Let's talk
Well,
about QAnon for a second. You know, like maybe we should teach conspiracy theory.
Yeah,
That's
that's a
That's
good
that,
idea.
that's actually not a bad idea in terms of as an elective, getting to know what all those different conspiracy theories are and
Know your
having
enemy.
the back. Well, not necessarily that they're enemies, because it could be true, Greg. For all
Oh,
we
you're
know.
right. JFK. That's I believe that one.
The moon
JFK
landing was faked.
JFK was
Obviously.
killed by the phone company, is what I remember hearing.
No, I never heard that one.
It was a movie with it was like one of the early movies with James Woods and Robert Downey Jr.
Two
And
upstanding Hollywood performers, by the
right,
way.
but before I think either of them went off the rails. This is like early
Yeah.
in their careers, and the it was some detective movie. But there was a litigation that was taking place in one of the parts of the movie where they brought a guy in to talk who believed that it was the phone company that was responsible for the death of JFK. So that's where that
Was there a
idea
reason
came.
why? What did they have against JFK? The phone companies.
I don't remember, but that was the guy who had a conspiracy theory. It's like when you first got the
Yeah.
idea of the wide-eyed conspiracy theorist. That was like an example of that. It was like somewhere back in the early '90s, I think. Like I said, in the early days of both of their careers. I think Woods had a bigger career at the time than Downey Jr. did, but that was before Jr. wound up in the
What do phone companies
prison.
promote? 5G towers.
Well, this is
See?
Ma Bell, so this is at the time when there was still the monopoly.
Yeah.
Because back in 1963, when Kennedy was shot, there was no other phone companies, as far as I can recall. I guess there
Maybe he
was
was trying to break them up. The monopoly.
that he was trying to break up Ma Bell, and so they went after him.
JFK was.
Hey, that's
Yeah.
possible. So
Mhm.
so your idea about learning about conspiracy theories is not necessarily a bad one, but then you'd have to bring in all of them. You'd have to bring in Bigfoot, and you'd have to bring in
I really want to attend some online lectures with Professor Alex Jones. I mean, it's like that guy is pure 100% entertainment all the time.
He's a very excited man. He's very enthusiastic.
I'm just
I
surprised
admire
at
that.
how many people watch that guy, though. That's the frightening thing, is like what keeps him on the air.
Do you
For
guys know a
people
weird
that-
fact about him? Oh, I'm sorry, Matt.
No,
What were you saying?
the only weird fact I know about the guy is everything he says.
No, that he was good friends with Bill Hicks, the great
Okay.
comedian. They were
Yeah.
pals. It's so weird. I mean, I think it was before Alex Jones was Alex Jones.
I wonder
He
if
was just
Alex Jones actually believes the things that he says.
Yeah, I always wonder that too, because it's good for his radio. He knows that people want to hear him go off the rails.
I will go on the record right now and saying that I have been on the radio with Alex Jones at least
What?
5 times.
You've been
Like you were
on
a
the.
calling listener? Or
You were a host.
guest?
You were a guest
I was a guest.
of his show. How long ago?
92.
Okay, so this is
91.
before he had his huge listenership that he has now.
No, this was before InfoWars. This was when he
Yeah.
was an AM conservative, libertarian, mostly talk radio guy out of Austin, Texas.
Okay.
So he wasn't that nutty then, or was he just as
No.
conspiratorial?
He wasn't any nuttier than any libertarian conservative talk radio guy on an AM station.
What was the context, or why were
It's
you
a
on
very
the show?
niche.
What was your purpose to be on the show? Like what? I want to hear the story.
Abolishing the IRS.
Okay.
Yeah,
Getting rid of
that's how
getting rid of
Brendan
income
cut his
taxes.
teeth on Capitol Hill, was basically trying to get rid of the IRS.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, does that help you, Greg? You're silent now. I was expecting some great response from that.
I was trying to think how I felt about that. Like, it seems like, don't we need taxes to pay for things? But I'm sure you have reasons why we don't.
Well, it
I've
wouldn't
never
be
really
like
thought
you'd
about
be
it.
getting rid of taxes. You'd just be getting rid of the IRS.
You'd be
Personal
getting rid of,
income tax.
Yeah.
yeah, you'd be getting rid of an income tax and replacing it with a consumption tax.
Okay.
That was the concept at the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily a non-viable.
So everything would be sales tax, basically, mostly.
Mostly,
Sales tax.
I mean, it went through several variations. I lost in the great debate of having it be more of a value-added tax, and it became more of a direct retail sales tax with exemptions for, basic clothing and food and the sort of things that most states exempt from sales taxes.
Food's not exempt from sales tax in most states. Oregon was weird when I came and I was like, I don't have to pay tax at the grocery store. In Arizona,
I don't
did.
remember paying sales taxes on food at grocery stores.
In Arizona, I think I did.
I mean,
Okay, I could be wrong.
I
I'm
moved
sorry.
here from Virginia, and Virginia we had taxes on frickin' everything. And I mean, you got taxed on your car, you got taxed on the license plate for your car. You had to get two different kinds of tests. You had to get a damaged license and a frickin' DEQ as well, and anyway, there was a sales tax and an income tax in Virginia.
Yeah, it depends on the state. Some states have both, so they have an income tax and a sales tax. And where they have an income tax, usually certain specific items are exempt from the sales tax because they have that other revenue stream. But if you have a state that's just a pure sales tax, isn't Washington just a pure sales tax?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Washington sales tax in Oregon is income tax. So that's people live in Washington and they buy in Oregon.
That's completely 100% my plan once I move there.
Wouldn't that basically be a flat tax, though, in a theory? Because basically, I guess rich people do buy a few more luxury items. But it's not like they're consuming enough. A billionaire isn't consuming enough for 1,000 people buying that much shit. So his taxes would go way lower, right? I imagine. If he was just paying sales tax.
What do you think he's spending his money on? Nothing? He's just
he is
sleeping on his beds of money?
No, just that he's probably buying all the food we buy, probably going to better restaurants, buying a yacht every now and then, buying a sex robot from Japan, maybe.
Only one?
A few luxuries.
You wouldn't have a harem of sex robots?
You're right, he might be very greedy. But how many do you need? I just think that like a billionaire can't consume as much as 1,000 people.
No, you're
so
right.
Their taxes would go lower.
You're right, which is why I was more leaning towards a value-added tax, so that the Jeff Bezos of the world, who are getting away with who are now currently getting away with murder in terms of Amazon
and literal murder,
would be taxed basically on all of the transactions, which would collect a whole lot more money. But I mean, I was in my 20s at the time, dude. I'm not suggesting it was the best idea. I was a libertarian once too. I mean,
Well, there's some good things in the libertarian ideology, like pot should be legal, prostitution should be legal.
Yeah.
Stoned prostitutes should be legal.
Yes.
But what about those? Well, right. But what about the ones on heroin?
They should be thrown in jail.
Oh.
They're not as fun. Yeah, if you've ever had a prostitute on heroin, they're not as fun as a stoned prostitute.
Doesn't the Bible say, like, if you shall fornicate, you should be stoned?
Yeah, I think so.
I think that's the definition of stoning that they were using as well. It had nothing to do with
Give them a joint.
It had nothing to do with actual rocks. It had to do
If
with
someone is fucking, give them a joint so they can have a
just,
better time.
it just had to do with alcohol and marijuana.
Yeah.
Leviticus 4:17.
Those are the
All
rules.
fornicators should be stoned.
God, that would change everything if that was the actual definition.
Yeah.
It
Who
would
knows what
change
the
all
Aramaic
sorts
was?
of interesting judgment that has been
Maybe
happened
King
over
James
this.
got it wrong.
That's right. It's like, no, people, that's not what they meant by stoning at all. It's like it was
Yeah,
completely opposite.
the translations of the Bible is a completely interesting separate subject, but yeah.
I remember talking to a German religious scholar who had studied the Bible in the original Aramaic, and she was telling me that one of the biggest issues that's created a lot of problems for people throughout hundreds of years was the bad translation of the term "thou shalt not suffer a witch." I can't remember the
To
exact
live?
title. Yeah, and in this case, she said the translation was wrong. It's not supposed to be witch. It was supposed to be poisoner. Thou shalt not suffer
Wow.
a poisoner to live, and that mistranslation is what caused the deaths of so many people. And it means obviously completely different things. Now, of course, a witch could be a poisoner if witches truly existed, and I guess you could call somebody that if they poisoned you too. So that could tie in together. But it makes you wonder, like, what other mistranslations have occurred. And I don't know if hers was accurate because, other
Yeah.
people would say differently.
I just
She's
wondered
full of
about.
shit. It's obvious she's full of shit.
She's a witch, probably.
That
Trying to
damn-
defend
Yeah, she's a
her
fucking
friends.
witch for
That
sure.
she must be.
Yeah.
She was a witch. Didn't want to
She was
get
just trying to
stoned.
cover her tracks, Matt, and you got sucked into her whole
You
bullshit.
dupe.
Well, maybe that should be a class that gets to go back to school is how to be a witch. Make that
no.
Speaking of witches, here's
Yes.
the thing. The witches are all on TikTok, and they're fucking with the moon. And that was a whole story from about 2 weeks ago that I meant to bring up, but I forgot.
Where
They're
there's
fucking with the moon?
with witches on TikTok?
Yeah. Yeah, there is a whole, like...
Are they
witch-
Chinese witches? Because I thought TikTok was like this big conspiracy from China that was going to take over the country or something.
No.
They're getting all the information about people because they're a Chinese company. But,
You're watching MSNBC too much. You need to tune into Twitter. So, no, the truth is...
Twitter is more accurate than us.
For sure, 100%. At least as accurate, let's be honest.
So what were you going to say, Brendan?
The point is that, there is literally, this is from Wired, I think is where I read it, but there is a real culture of witches that exist on TikTok, and a group of young witches, like...
Witches or Wiccans?
I don't know, they're calling them witches. You really
Okay.
want to split hairs?
Well, no, it's a splitting of hair because Wicca is like the religion of witches, right?
These
they call
people are on TikTok, which means they've got about 8 brain cells.
Okay.
So
Between
I'm
them.
sure
Enough.
that any Wiccans who are listening to our broadcast aren't on TikTok.
Okay, and they're not taking over the moon.
And they're not taking over. But anyway, the
Okay.
point was that this group of young witches had decided to curse the moon to get back at Trump. And it was right at that time, and I'm not kidding you, it was right about that time this whole TikTok controversy came up.
Regarding the moon.
None dare call it conspiracy.
Regarding the conspiracy of TikTok, and all of a sudden Donald Trump wants to take out TikTok, and Microsoft is going to buy TikTok. All of this was like 2 weeks before that story broke. I was reading on Wired about the witches on TikTok taking out the moon, and how the other witches on TikTok are like, this is going to be bad for us. And all of a sudden, the next thing I read, and I'm not making this up, the next thing I read, Donald Trump is bitching about TikTok. Microsoft is going to buy it. Trump is going to broker some deal. And I'm like, wow. The TikTok witches.
I just love hearing you say the witches on TikTok over and over. The witches on TikTok.
I kind of
Has a
want
nice
that to be a movie.
Musicality.
The Witches of TikTok.
TikTok witches, man.
That'd be a great. Are they like an organization like Witches Against Trump, and it's pronounced what?
No, it's more of I think it's more of just a loosely based, TikTok.
They're TikTokians.
Maybe I don't know how TikTok works, so maybe they're all connected, like they're all
From what I
friends.
understand, TikTok is basically advanced Snapchat or something. That's about as much as I can figure out.
Yeah, I
It's
don't
like
get it either.
Snapchat is like the 3 second things that people send you for no freaking reason whatsoever.
Well,
And then TikTok is like you can get that up to like 15 or 30 seconds, I
well,
believe.
TikTok started, from what I understand, TikTok started as it was an app that kids could use to make like lip sync videos, and that's
Uh,
what sort of catapulted it into whatever. And then it just tore off into different directions. Like there was a whole thing like 2 weeks ago, or no, it was maybe a month ago. It was trending on TikTok about uh, these kids were doing these point of view. I was a Holocaust person and I died TikTok videos, and it was just blowing up all over the place. TikTok is horrible. I hope if Trump does anything, if he abolishes TikTok, I might vote for him.
I don't really know enough about TikTok other than when the Tiger show was being very popular on Netflix that there were like these videos of people dancing to a special song about the Tiger guy on the show. And that's
Yeah,
about as much as I know about TikTok other than apparently witches are.
I'm so proud to be American. We're a great country.
this is
We're terrific.
this is why our education system needs to be fixed.
Yes.
Greg, this is why majority can't rule. This is why
Maybe you're right.
pure
The
this is why
electoral college.
pure democracy can't be viable because we're a nation of idiots.
I kind of want to move to Florida now, not just to get cheap guns from Brendan. I want him to homeschool me, him and his wife, so I can be as smart as his 11-year-old daughter.
Sure, come on
I think
down.
the daughter will be homeschooling you is what will be happening.
Yeah,
She's
probably.
like, really? Are you stupid?
No, Greg, that's Aristotle, not Plato. You fucking moron.
Jeez. And what's the
You,
relationship to Alexander the Great? You still don't know that?
Hey guys, I'm
Oh, wow.
curious. Do you think witches get tax exempt status from the government as a religion? You think you
Wiccans,
can pull that shit off?
Wiccans do. As a matter
They
of
do.
fact, there's like as part of military chaplains, they have to know Wiccan rituals for people who are Wiccans in the military.
Oh,
Yeah.
so they have to burn some sage and
I
rub it
don't
on
know
their
what the hell they would do. Maybe they'd have to
something
dance. They have to
hippie-ish.
dance naked in the full moon. I don't know what the
I
chaplain would
always
do.
thought, people sometimes argue that you're a secular humanist. That's a religion. So I was just like, so does that mean my bowling league can get tax exempt status? Like we're all secular humanists. We just like bowling. We don't believe in any gods. So
Well, I mean,
that's a religion.
getting into the definition of religion, I don't know that secular humanism could be considered that because religion is from the Latin religere, which means to bind, to bring together,
Yeah.
and it's usually with a certain amount of rituals and tradition. And I don't think secular humanism has ritual and tradition to it,
but
Yeah.
other than
if secular humanism did, like
yes.
bowling on Wednesday night,
Yeah, that would be our
then
sacrament.
the only thing divorcing religion from the secular humanist bowlers is metaphysics.
Okay, so the question then would be is like where do they sit within the metaphysical realm? These secular humanists,
Well,
like
they
Right,
they
but
have
reject
to
it.
have some concept of not necessarily a god, but of a spiritual level of humanity. If they added that, although I kind of like the concept of secular humanist bowling leagues, and
I'm
I
all
bet
for
most
it.
of them are.
most of the bowling leagues, I
I'm
don't
sure
know.
most of them don't
They
give a
do a
shit.
lot of praying on those lanes. I
Oh,
don't know.
that is true. You're right.
Yeah,
When they get a
like
strike.
please give me one. Give me a strike
I,
Yeah.
god.
I told my son that if they asked him about his religion, to tell him that he worshipped fire and see where they went with that, just for fun.
It would be like a Norse thing. Like suddenly he's, you know, worshiping Vulcan or something.
Or that old
Yeah,
rock song. What is that song? I am the god of hellfire, and I bring you. Whoa.
That
Are you
dog,
running dog fights?
I think
in
what's
your-
happening is the dog does not appreciate your mantra that you were doing there, Greg.
No, Arthur Brown, right? The Crazy World of Arthur Brown. Fire.
Oh, that was the artist from like
I'm
the
ready
60s, right?
to burn. Yeah. That's kind of, he sounds like a god at the beginning. He sounds like some demon.
I think it's sad that Brendan has to mute himself because of the dog.
well, as
Oh.
it turns out, Michael Vick came over, and so
There's
that all
fighting
got
going
started.
on.
Mhm.
Taking bets.
We're
He's
taking
fighting your
bets.
dog.
All right,
We're
so
just
we got sidetracked whenever I brought. I was gonna we'll do a list of them, and we just stopped on shop class, and then we just went a whole different area. So there's like metal shop, there's wood shop, but what about like band or choir? What about various different kinds of history classes? Which history classes would be the best ones to keep or get rid of? Which class do you think absolutely has to go, though, of all the classes that are taught, whether it's elective or not? What class do you think would be one that would do everyone good if it was just
If we're in the real world and we have to worry about like, hey, schools are underfunded everywhere, right?
uh-huh.
I guess I could say that I wouldn't give a shit if my kid didn't take art class. And if he really loves it, I'll buy him art supplies. He'll learn on his own. If he has a passion for it, I'll expose him to it. But I mean, if we had to cut the fat, if like, well, hey, we only have this much money for this many
Well, we're not doing this
teachers.
based on money. We're doing it based upon usefulness. Now, I think art, I mean, honestly, I didn't get much out of it, but I know art is really good for certain kids. It's like
No, it
certain
is.
kids need that. They're the ones who can't do shop, but they can do art, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's necessary to have that in place for those who have that bent, who
No, I
that
love
could
art.
be where their life takes them.
let me challenge you. I did shop and art, so
Yeah.
I don't know where the fuck that statement just came from. You can do art, but you can't. Kids that do art can't do shop, but kids that do
No,
shop can't
he
do
was
art.
saying some kids can. Some kids
Some
suck
I'm
at
kids.
saying
science,
I'm
but they're
saying
very
some
good at
people
art.
have natural predilections for other things.
Yeah.
That's all. I'm
Like
not
And
I
saying
couldn't
shop
do
and
shop.
art are.
yeah, this isn't like black and white cut and dry. I don't think that way, Brendan. You got to like take that concept away from you when you're talking about me. I don't,
He's very
you know,
I'm
gray.
just giving you
I'm
shit.
not,
I'm
I'm
trying
not
to make the
saying this like
show interesting, and
that's a.
you're doing a lecture.
The show is not interesting. Have you not figured out that yet? For crying out loud, it's the three
He
of
wants
us talking.
conflict.
Who wants to hear us talk? For crying out loud,
No
20,
one.
20 people who are doing it maybe by accident
But people
because
might want to hear
I
us
sent
argue.
links out all over Facebook or something. People want what, Greg?
Might want to hear us argue.
Oh,
People like conflict.
maybe. Well, it is, that's the nature of the show, quibbling, squabbling,
Okay, can
bickering.
I just say about the art thing? I love the fact that, like Portland, I don't know if you know this, Brendan, our city has an art tax because the public education wasn't funding art. So Portland just said, we want our kids to learn art. Everyone in the city, I've never paid a city tax before, on top of state and federal. And you pay $75 a year so kids can go to art class in Portland. I pay it gladly. I'm glad I can afford $75. I want kids to have the
Well, to
ability,
be
but
completely forthcoming, my wife, her salary is paid by that art tax.
yeah, but
Yeah,
most
She
school
wouldn't have had a
systems,
job without that art tax, to be honest.
yeah. Oh,
I think
Yeah,
that's super cool. To
yeah.
come back to before I interrupted Matt's interesting diatribe about art and shop class kids being mutually exclusive. Let's get rid of drill
If
team.
you go to one, you got to kill the other one, really.
Yeah, let's get rid of drill team, cheerleading. Um,
don't say marching band. My brother was in marching band. He
no,
loved
I
it.
think band is important.
Well,
I think
marching
we
band
could,
comes under the heading of band anyway.
yeah, band, whatever. I think we could honestly get rid of sports, and it wouldn't be a problem.
Me too. I agree.
I think, sports comes under the heading of physical education. So I think if you have them as part of the curriculum as opposed to extracurricular, that would be beneficial. And considering all the controversy the sports teams are doing these days, and even the heavy right wingers now are like swearing off the NFL and they're swearing off the NBA. For me, a person who never watches professional sports, I'm like, finally, people are joining my movement. I'm like going, yeah, no more pro sports. Go for it. Boycott them. Go
Oh,
for it. I
I
mean,
would love it.
such a
I hate
waste.
sports.
I don't
All
hate
right.
them. I
I
don't
hate
hate
them.
I don't hate sports. I appreciate what the athletes can do. I appreciate that it definitely helps people out of bad circumstances.
Yeah.
I appreciate that aspect of sports. But for me personally, I just don't get entertained by it, right? So I'm not spending. I'm in a constant boycott of professional sports because I just don't care, right? But
Yeah.
I understand it gets a lot of people really interested and people get very involved in that. I think there's far too much obsession with professional sports in our country. But I think as entertainment goes, it's just as valid as music is in that same regard. It provides something for some people, like with art and with shop. There's different people who have different predilections. I mean, when I was in
Hmm.
school, I did lots of different things, and I think those things should be available. But I'm just wondering, what's the thing? I agree about like the drill team and the cheerleading because I don't see what benefit those actually have
Now,
at all.
all that's doing is sexualizing teenage girls. Let's be honest. That's all
And
it
Yeah.
does. So sports, the only thing about sports now, unlike the two of you, I love watching football. I love watching basketball. I'm totally into sports.
Mhm.
I'm not like next level sports dude, but oh man, watching a football game, I love it. But should we revolve that much around our public education and that? Couldn't that just be because it makes so much money? You could just split it off from public education and put it over here as a completely different organization. And if from little league to middle school to high school, there could be organizations. They could charge people to go to the games. I would pay for those. The kids could do that after school. Why make it a central part of the high school experience to have sports teams and the costs of that? And then you have to have cheerleaders and drill team and all that. I just think, who cares?
Well, I think the people who participate in those things care, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah,
Right,
I
but they
but
don't
can.
think anybody else does.
I'm saying you could participate in that,
Yeah.
and it's organized outside of the public school system.
Well, it does make
Yeah,
you wonder, like, how did cheerleading get involved with these sports teams? How is it that sports got these extra agents involved who are like running around in pom poms? Where the hell did those come from?
people like
Anyway,
seeing pretty girls. I guess they
Yeah,
figured it was.
yeah, but
yeah.
they added guys to the cheerleading as well, so they're jumping around and tossing them up in the air too. But
Nobody cares about the guy cheerleaders.
Well, they had to give something to the gay people to do.
Hmm.
right,
Yep.
because it's only gay men who are doing
I
cheerleading.
bet. I bet if you polled
I
them,
would say it's a pretty high
not
percentage.
literally.
I'm not willing to put my neck out for that one. Anyway, point being that I think as a subject, I don't know that those are subjects. I mean, because again, sports are taught within PE. So the question is PE relevant? Is PE something that could be gotten rid of? I think that's necessary for kids in school
Yeah, I
to
like
have
PE.
some outlet for their
Yeah,
energy.
Yeah, I mean, organized physical activity, whatever.
Yeah.
that should be something
Calisthenics.
taught as
Or
something that's
maybe,
part
or
of your
maybe
life.
what they do. Oh, this is a brilliant idea, if I do say so myself. Every
And you do say
class,
so yourself because you just did.
because nobody else is saying it, but every class should have a physical education element to it. So, in other words, if this is what needs to be added, you can get rid of PE as a whole, right? But instead, every teacher needs to know PE because they need to have activities happening while they're teaching their other subjects. So they could be, everybody could be running life cycle while they're learning about history at the same time.
That's not a bad idea. Why not?
Put everybody on a bike, like a stationary bike, and then
Just like
they
I always watch a movie when I do my elliptical. Like I can listen to a conversation or a lecture
that'll come
while
under
I
the adulting
exercise.
part. It's like, how do you keep yourself entertained when you're living a solitary, alone, sad existence? And they should be preparing kids for that too.
You've really nailed me right there. That's
Is
a
that
little too brutally honest now.
they have to get.
Well, there's,
I wasn't just thinking about you, Greg.
Yeah,
there's
you
certain
were.
subjects that would lend itself to that for sure. Like if you're watching a history movie, you could bike, but I mean, it'd be hard to like do push-ups while you're trying to do math.
No, that wouldn't work. But a lecture, I'm going to
Well,
tell
it
you about
depends
World War
upon if you're
II.
doing addition. You can do addition and push-ups.
How could you write? You have to
One,
use a pencil.
2,
No,
3,
you're adding every
4.
push-up.
Exactly. Now, long division, that's
I
a
am
different story.
sure that this school that you're dreaming up, Matt, you would have loved. You would have excelled in this environment.
Uh,
Matt was a jock when he was younger.
given the fact that I'm morbidly obese currently, that doesn't mean I was that way throughout my life. I was actually in numerous sports when I was in high school. I was quite trim and slim, and I have evidence. I have proof of that. So
I'm sure
Show
you have
us.
photos, but then
I,
if you were into sports as a kid, why are you so anti-sport now?
no, it's not. Again, it's not that I'm anti-sports per se. I'm kind of against professional sports in general, but I appreciate athletes. So I appreciate athleticism. People who are good at things, I got to give them credit for being
Mhm.
good at those things. I just think that too much too much is given to that particular form of entertainment, as opposed to most forms of entertainment where
Comic
money is
collecting.
going.
But I mean, money goes to that form of entertainment because there's a lot of people that will pay. I mean, it's a free market system. I don't
Sure.
think anyone is forced to pay for season tickets to the Seattle Seahawks because
Oh,
somebody's put a gun to their head.
I
Yeah.
mean, there might be cases of that, but yeah, generally no. Yeah,
Yeah, I think I
I don't know
agree.
why people are spending that much money to watch those things either. To me, every professional sports game is like every other professional sports game.
I
You
just
know,
hated it
you
because on
have
Sunday
like in football,
afternoon,
you got a guy here and he's got a ball, and then the ball's going to go down to that end, and then they got to get the ball and take that from there and go to the other end, and then they got to get that ball, and then they got to go back forth again. They got to go back to that other end. They got to go back to that other. So it's like it's pretty
I
much the
gotta
same
say
game
that,
every time
like,
you watch it.
as some guy who hates sports, but I had some fun playing basketball with some friends and stuff and doing some sports myself, playing football with the neighborhood kids. It was fun, but watching it, I don't get.
Yeah,
I
it's
just,
more
and it
fun
would,
to participate than it is
yeah,
to
but it
watch it.
would
Yeah.
bother me so much because I was a total idiot when I was a kid. I watched so much TV, and every Sunday, hey, I'd rather watch this cool sci-fi movie. Oh, but the football game's on. Everything's football this today.
I mean,
I'd be so pissed.
I can see a case for looking at it from the nuances because it's kind of like if you're into reading about plays or participating in a play and then watching a play, you can take it from that point of view too. It's like, well, it's better to perform in a play than to watch a play. So it's the same thing. It's with pro sports, it's better to participate in the sport than it is to watch it. But I can see the case for it. It's just for me, it just feels the same whenever I watch professional sports games or pretty much any of the sports games, unless it's somebody I know who's participating in it. I just don't get that wrapped up in it. It doesn't have that much meaning for me.
I
It's
do
So
get
just
what?
wrapped up in some of the Olympic events, like the women's speed skating, because they all have these beautiful thighs. They have these amazing tree trunk, luscious thighs. And so
I really
I was
love
very into
the
sports.
Olympic gymnastics.
Oh God!
Oh,
But then
those
you feel all
14-year-old
curvy.
Russian
I,
girls.
they
oh,
are
and you
pretty
gave me
hot, I
crap
gotta say.
earlier. So you've killed Brendan, Greg. 'Cause you brought up women's speed skating.
Those women are not 14. They're no teenagers excel at that. You got to be a full grown woman to do that shit.
Okay, yeah, because that's exciting.
It is to
That's
me.
like making the same case for like I'm not going to watch football, but I'll watch NASCAR. I just watch people going around in circles. That's
I,
super exciting.
I
Well, if they
didn't
were
s-
wearing bikinis,
I
I
didn't
would.
say anything that I was a fan of NASCAR either.
I wasn't talking to you, Matt.
Oh, okay. I
The
couldn't
whole world
tell.
does not revolve around Matt.
Well, I couldn't tell because your eyes are poking off in another direction, so I don't know who you're talking to.
Well,
So
I don't
wait,
know
why
how
do
to do
I?
that on Zoom.
I don't think
I'm
you
looking at
understood
you,
what
Greg.
I don't think you understood what I was saying. I don't like any
No.
sport, but I like sports that involve me seeing hot women.
So
Oh, so then,
specifically,
dude,
like if they're climbing volcanoes.
then
Sure, that was
forget
a sport.
speed skating. You need to get into two things. One,
Female professional wrestling.
no, that's
Yep.
bullshit. Because
Glow.
that's stupid. Professional wrestling is stupid. Let me finish.
No.
One,
One.
you need to get into beach volleyball,
Okay.
Oh
girls
yes,
beach
I've seen
volleyball.
those. I've watched those
Two,
games.
lingerie football.
Is lingerie football a
That's not
sport?
real.
Is
Yeah,
that a
it is.
sport?
Yeah,
They're like have leagues?
yeah. The Seattle Mist. Have you not heard of the Seattle Mist?
No, you made this up.
No, I'm not. I
Oh,
have
So
a
wait, do they
client.
we
I have
do
a
have a
client.
roller skating team here. Was it what do they
a
call it
roller
again?
derby?
Roller
Oh
derby,
yeah,
right?
what is our
They have
team?
Portland roller
Por-
derby.
Yeah,
That's
the
because
rip
it's
sides.
Portland. They also have people with like twisted mustaches and kazoos and unicycles.
Hey, I
No,
had one of those
Tucson.
twisted mustaches for a
Yep,
while
you
there,
did.
buddy.
Tucson had a roller derby team. It's kind of a thing now. A lot of cities have roller derby. It came back.
Maybe they
And
should do lingerie roller derby. Then that would be a thing.
I don't get though the football because don't those women get really hurt because they can't wear padding and knee guards
It's
or do they?
probably remove part of the lingerie to get them as opposed to tackling them.
No,
Oh,
no, you guys should YouTube it and watch.
okay, I will.
I know
Believe
that
me.
Greg
I know
will.
Greg will.
I know Greg will.
I don't know that Matt will, but I know
I,
Greg will.
because once again, it's a sport, and I don't really give a crap. Even if they're wearing lingerie, it's like, whatever.
Because sports is stupid.
Nah, it's just not my interest.
No, it's
You
just the
know,
people who
I don't go
watch
out of
sports
my
are
way to
stupid.
watch people put out oil fires either. It's just kind of like not
Because
a
that's exactly the same thing.
well,
Somebody putting out an oil fire and somebody playing a professional sports game are exactly the
it's
same thing.
exciting to somebody, but to me, neither one. I was using that as an example of that's how much I equate them with each other.
So on a Sunday afternoon, because you're not a sports guy,
Uh-huh.
and a lot of guys will be watching a football game,
Oh
whether
no,
they're
we're not going to
whether
go
they're
into my watching habits. We're going to avoid that for this episode because that'll go into very dangerous territory.
Suburban Housewives of Dallas, Part
oh
4.
oh
No, that's
yeah,
not. I wasn't.
I
I
can
was.
see how reality television is way superior to sports.
I'm
It's
not
human
finding.
drama.
Again, not saying it's superior. I'm just saying that one doesn't have an interest for me. That's all.
All right.
Yeah, it's just I don't have a problem with other people watching it. I have a problem with them giving shitloads of money to it when there's so many other things they can. But yeah, it's like I don't watch commercial television for the most part either. I try to avoid giving money to places that I don't think really deserve the money. But
Okay.
yeah, that being said, though, you know, people want to do acting. If people want to do sports in school, okay. But what subjects should be like tossed out completely. So,
Well,
or added to.
ironically, I was the one that suggested tossing sports out.
Oh, okay. Well, I think
Yes.
that again, it comes under the heading of public physical education, which I think needs to stay in school. But what's a subject? We've run a couple, but what's a subject that is direly missing from school that would be really fun for the kids to have that they don't necessarily have it at all, or has never
Fun.
been that has never been a subject? Well, one that would make them easy to learn, you know, or not
Well,
easy, but challenging to
well, I
learn.
think we've already suggested classes I wish we had. Like we have like civics,
Yeah, yeah,
philosophy.
those are nice and boring. I'm talking about
Yeah,
something
yeah.
interesting, some new exciting thing that would be good to put into the school system.
Video games.
I mean,
They,
like video game creation, maybe.
no, they'd learn how to play video games
Play
better with
video games.
tips and
They do
tricks.
that at home already. But maybe that's the trick. Maybe we force them to play video games in school, and that will cause them to finally do other homework when they're home.
Nah, it's not going to
I
happen.
Yeah, I
I
don't think
think
that would
the
work
answer to
either.
that question posed by Matt is animal husbandry. I think that we have animals, pets, goats, sheep, cows, chickens, whatever. I think we encourage kids to take care of animals.
Well, you
I
know,
Hmm.
think that we
here in Clackamas County, Oregon, at the school my kids went to, that was an elective.
I think that's great.
Yeah,
I think it
they had a number of really interesting electives here. They had like cosmetology, they had cooking, like a chef class. Like one of my kids took culinary skills for like 3 years.
that's
Um,
Wow.
cool.
they had actually firefighting was one. Law enforcement was another one. Auto mechanics. Another one took like mechanical engineering. So these were all electives that they could take. They weren't forced classes, but they're electives. So you know, I think animal husbandry is a great idea as well. I was
And it
thinking
would be
just
Yeah.
fun.
something. I think it was like maybe like Space Force. You know, I think that
Space
because
Force.
it's a brand new thing, and there needs to be somebody like really advocating for what it would take to be part of Space Force, other
Yeah.
than
Well, you know,
Space
it's
Ghost.
funny. My son Rourke, after he joined the Navy, received communication from Space Force
Uh huh.
explaining that he could switch before he started, and he might want to be a part of that, and he considered it, but he decided not to.
Well, I think regardless of however anybody feels about Trump, I don't think Space Force is going away after he leaves office because that would take like I think an act of Congress to eliminate it. You know, and we know that people really like having different branches of the military because it's more money that can go into the military industrial complex. It's like
Most
one
people
new
don't like
aspect of it.
that.
They don't
A
like what?
few rich people like that. Money going into the military industrial
Right, but it's the
complex.
ones who have the money. That's what I'm talking about. So that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. I don't see it going away. You know, I
Yeah,
don't
you're
see
probably
that being
right.
disbanded unless they just find absolutely no use for it at all.
Well, there is no use for it now.
Well,
We can.
I
Our
don't
Earth is going
understand the
under.
purpose of it. I haven't looked into it enough to understand the purpose of Space Force. But yeah,
We're
it's
not there yet. It's like I could see if, like, yeah, we got spaceships going to the moon and Mars all the time. Like, if this was 2001, yeah, you might need, like, hey, we have to protect those people. Maybe another country will try to attack our forces on Mars.
Okay.
all
All
right.
right.
I know a subject then. The subject should be futurology. That should be the subject. The
Mm.
study of the future, things that could come to pass. That should be some kind of a topic so that people can start having an awareness of where things are heading or where things could head. And that could be, we get out of philosophy, we get into what are the real aspects of the world. So there we go. I just made that up. All right.
Futurology.
Exactly. Futurology
Passed.
is the next subject that should be added to all curricula in every school in this country.
I'll talk to my congressman
Do
in
that.
Salem.
I think we need to now get into the pizza fund because it's a good point. I think a good stopping point to check that out.
I'm
So,
not even enthusiastic anymore. It's so little every time. I'm like, this is never going to happen.
well,
I'm discouraged.
right now we passed the $3 mark. We
Ooh.
finally we're at $3.34, and last week we were at like $2.91, I think. So
Wow. That
we
seems
made-
like a big jump.
Yeah, that is a big jump for
well,
us.
this week I went a little more nuts in terms of putting the podcast link all over the place. So I think that added to some listens. We like I said, we're at 334, and for analytics, the first episode is still the most popular one. Favorite ethnic foods at 52 listens. Where'd my analytics go? Why is this messing?
Is that 1/8 of a person in Croatia still listening to us? The man
Okay.
who's not a whole man.
We are 79% American, 17% France. I think that's about the same as last week. 1%
Yeah.
Ireland, and then it's minus 1% in Canada, Ukraine, Nigeria, United Kingdom, and Germany. Now, this is interesting, though. This is where people are listening to the podcast, right? So 28% are listening to through Apple Podcasts, 13% are listening to it through Spotify, 12% are listening to it through Anchor, and 4% are listening to it through Google Podcasts. And the biggest chunk is from a random other podcast areas. 39% is other ones. So I guess it can't just be the three of us, because I just listen to it through Anchor, and I think Greg listens.
I just listened to it through Anchor.
And Greg listens to it through Apple or
Mhm.
some other app. So that means that we're getting people from weird places. Our demographics haven't changed much. 66%, that's our biggest number, is through 45 to 59-year-olds, which is all three of us. 9% is 60 plus, so we're getting some of the elderly. 35 to 44-year-olds, there's 11%. 35 to 44 years old. That's interesting. 3%, 23 to 27 years old.
Yes.
And 1% is 28 to 34. So we are getting a little bit of a younger generation.
Come on, those are your kids, Matt.
This is from my kids don't listen to my podcast. They hear enough of me already. Spotify, from Spotify, the gender listening to is 60% female, 30% male, 9% non-specified, so nobody said who they were. So that's kind of fascinating stuff.
Maybe our next episode we should address this gender gap. Maybe we should talk about some feminine issues.
You mean like tampons?
If you want to.
Oh yeah,
Menses?
that'll go over real well. We are the enemy, Brendan, and we're going to start talking about women's issues.
How about douching? Let's talk about douching.
I mean, let's be honest. Nothing of the content that we've produced so far has any sensitivity to anything regarding women. So I don't know why we shouldn't, talk to the 800-pound gorilla in the middle of the room.
Well, I don't know if it's an 800-pound gorilla in the middle of any room of ours, but I think that it would certainly be something we could talk about it from our perspective of women, I guess. I don't know where we'd go. What would be the topic? We just women love
Women
them or
on
hate
trial.
them? Women
No.
Can't
Not
live
women
with
on
them.
trial.
for abuse or for
mean-
loving? What are we talking about?
For
Well, I
abuse
mean,
or
we
loving.
have we have three different perspectives. I've been married for 29 years.
Yes.
Matt, you've been married, divorced, and now remarried,
Correct.
which is mostly typical.
Yeah.
And then, Greg, you've never been married at all, right?
Yeah, and I've restored my virginity doing surgically. So I'm a virgin again. I have no experience.
Did you sew your foreskin back on?
It's complicated.
He just shoved all of his semen back in. He collected it from all the places.
Oh my god! Can I have that back, please?
You shaved that
I'm
whole
sorry.
area and then just pushed your penis back into your body.
It's complicated.
He roofied himself, so he forgot everything.
Well,
That's what happened. Anyway, so what would be the topic? The topic you want to talk about?
I just would love to call it women on trial.
Maybe wait a minute, hold time. So you said the women, it was mostly women, and they were what age?
Well, it was 60% women. I didn't have the age for the women.
So let's say the age is relatively similar. I'm sure not all of our listeners are young women.
Yeah, if 60% of them are there, then it could be a similar demographic. 66% are 45 to 59-year-olds, but not.
Right.
We don't know what gender. So you're just talking about women who listen to our podcast?
Maybe we should talk about marriage.
Okay. In what context? What will we be saying about marriage?
Is it good? Is it bad?
Is marriage worth doing?
Married?
Should marriage exist?
Should marriage exist?
I think that could be a really good topic, actually. I think we.
Yeah. Why does it even exist? I mean,
Okay. I'm willing to go for that. All right, so I think we should wrap this up. Does anybody have one final pithy, prophetic statement they want to make before we end the show? Greg's usually good
Go
at
Seahawks.
Oh, say that again?
I said go Seahawks.